February 11, 1944. Today we engaged in a fierce battle with American fighters escorting the flying fortresses. In between battles we landed at Wiesbaden, February 20th, 1944. Today the squadron went up twice to intercept Boeings in the skies over northern Germany and over the North Sea. Specht made an emergency landing on the Danish island of Ærø. My unsuccessful shooting prevented me from increasing my personal score, although I had an excellent chance. February 21st, 1944. 2 more combat sorties today. We were tasked to divert escort fighters to the coast and engage them. The other squadron was attacking bombers at this time. In my squadron there were 2 dead. February 22nd, 1944, 12.54. Take-off on a mission. The Americans are bombing in central Germany. I can only get 5 airplanes in the air, as the losses the squadron has suffered in recent weeks are very heavy. There are over 1,000 enemy planes approaching. The Americans now do not fly in large groups. They are separated by 30 to 40 machines. The direction in which they are moving we call bomber alleys. These alleys are under the watchful eye of fighter planes. Today such an alley passed directly over my hometown, Hamelin. By a strange coincidence, I encountered enemy planes right over the hills familiar from my childhood to the west of the town. Together with Corporal Kruger, who had arrived in our unit only 2 days earlier, I attacked the Boeings as part of a group of 30 planes. I have had an automatic camera attached to my machine guns for 2 weeks now. The footage will be used for training purposes in schools for fighter pilots. In a frontal attack on a bomber, my first round hit right in the cockpit. I repeated the attack, diving at my victim from the rear while trying to avoid a collision. The Boeing tried to get out of the line of fire and made a sharp left turn. My line penetrated its left wing and fuselage. I couldn't take my eyes off the camera. The footage of this battle, if continued, could teach me a lot. Tongues of flame erupted from the tail of the bomber. I stayed close to it and shot all the contents of my magazines into the monster. Meanwhile, the young corporal was chasing the Boeing on the left. The guy has a lot of courage, despite some of his injuries. He approached the enemy to a distance of several meters without fear of collision. The crew of my Boeing jumped with parachutes. Their plane burned like a torch. It skidded slightly to the left and began to fall, leaving a tail of black smoke behind it. Hamelin is directly below me. The burning Boeing was falling faster and faster. Soon it entered a corkscrew and crashed in a meadow near the river on the southern edge of my hometown. A column of fire soared into the sky. From that meadow near the river I took to the air for the first time during demonstration flights. That was so long ago. At that moment another airplane crashed down. It crashed into a timber warehouse in the south of Hameln, near the mechanical plant building. This was my wingman, a young corporal. This was his first combat. I descended to the flaming wreckage, but he was killed instantly. I made a wide, low circle over the rooftops of my town. Not a soul in the streets. All the good citizens of Hamelin had crammed themselves into cellars and shelters. On my last drop of fuel, after 90 minutes of flight, I landed in Wunsdorf. The second time I took to the air was in pursuit of bombers who were already returning home. I didn't get a single chance to fire on the bombers, and what's more, I battled a cloud of thunderbolts for half an hour. I think they are too eager to take me by surprise. February 24th, 1944. I received word this morning that Geiger had been killed in the last night's fighting. Only a few weeks ago he had been awarded the Oak Leaves for the Knight's Cross and promoted to captain. I was left as the sole representative of Van Dicken's group of cadets from the military academy. Hein and Menapace were killed in Russia a few weeks ago. The squadron lost 6 more men this afternoon in a battle with Thunderbolts, Lightnings and Mustangs while covering a group of heavy bombers. Our already small group is getting smaller and smaller. Each of us can only wonder when it will be his turn. February 25th, 1944. The Americans and British are conducting their large-scale air operations without giving us the slightest respite. They drop hundreds of thousands of tons of explosives and incendiary bombs on our cities and industrial centres. Night after night, the sirens wail to herald another raid. How long will this continue? Again, the division's tracking service reported the damned Yankees in the Dora Dora sector. The constant, daily expectation of battle, the unrelenting nervous tension in which we live, does not allow us to relax. Now, after every battle, more and more new portraits appear on the wall. Enemies in the Dora Dora sector again. This message has another meaning for us now. It is a reminder that we are still alive. The weary faces of my comrades darken. Dora Dora sector, it will be the same today. We silently prepare for takeoff. One by one, we go to the restroom. It's part of the ritual. You don't need any laxatives to help induce that Dora Dora feeling. Takeoff is at 4 p.m. The planes made a circle over the airfield before forming up. Climb to 8,000 meters and move north, the base reported. The little ones are approaching from the sea. At 5,000 meters above Lüneburg, we joined up with the 3rd Squadron's formation. It's cold. I turned on the oxygen supply. 6,000 meters. We're keeping the airwaves quiet. We're getting periodic reports from the base about the location of the bombers. They're in the Siegfried Paula sector. 7,000 meters. We're flying in open formation, nerves tense, the monotonous buzzing of code signs in our earpieces. Short, long, 8,000 meters. The long trail of our engine exhaust trails behind us. 10,000 meters. My compressor's working fine. Engine, electrical oil, radiator temperature, instruments show everything is normal. The compass shows a heading of 360. On your left, they're to your left. We can't see them. Our nerves are tense. Suddenly I am alert and scrutinize the sky. A wide cloud cover hides the ground from us, the clouds stretching as far as the eye can reach. We are now at an altitude of 11,000 meters. Here we can catch a few enemy bombers or fighters. The white stripes. There they are. I see them, Specht reported with a characteristic squeak in his voice. Victor, Victor, the base confirmed. The bombers were coming 2,000 meters below us, 600 or 800 planes heading east. They were being escorted by fighter planes. At that moment I gave myself entirely to the excitement of the hunt. Specht laid the turn, tilting the left wing, and we lined up for the attack. Messerschmitt, after Messerschmitt, dive after him. Let's go. There was a mix of sounds on the air, all shouting at the same time. I checked my weapon, selected my target and took aim. Then I fumbled for the throttles with my thumb and forefinger and turned around. The Thunderbolts are closing in on us. We're faster, and we'll get to the Boeings before they can get in our way. Our fighters passed through the formation of bombers in a frontal attack. I hit the throttles, and my plane shook from the recoil. Let's go. My cannon shells pierced the wing of the Boeing. God damn it. I was aiming for the cockpit. I went to the rear of the bomber formation, followed by my wing. The Thunderbolts came at us. A fierce fight ensued. Again and again I tried to get into firing position, and each time I was forced to hide, because on my tail appeared 2, 4, 5, or even 10 Thunderbolts. Planes are flying like mad, both our own and the enemy's, but the Americans outnumber us 4 to 5 times. Several lightnings appeared and joined the others. I got one in my sights. Fire. The tracer went right over my head. I instinctively ducked. Explosions erupted. Good shooting. I was forced out of my position into a vertical corkscrew using an old reliable technique. For a moment I got a breather and glanced at the instruments. Everything seemed to be in order. Wennekers appeared beside me and pointed to the 4 lightnings on the left. Follow them. We made a sharp turn and dived on them. They glistened in the sun. I opened fire. Too soon the line went higher. I don't know what to do about my speed being too fast. And now the lightning is on my tail. I instantly threw the car to the left, laying down a steep dive. The engine roars. I've lost speed. My airplane is shaking from the sheer overload. The rivets on the wing frame are coming off. My ears popped. Slowly and carefully I began to level the plane. I was pressed into the seat. My eyes went black, my chin pressed against my chest. A lightning passed by, engulfed in flames. A Messerschmitt on its tail. Bingo! It's Wenneker's. A few seconds later, he appeared next to me. I waved to him with both hands. Congratulations. He was after you, he replied. A moment later, Wenneker's knocked the Yankee off my tail. After landing, I went up to him to shake hands, to congratulate him on his success, but before I could open my mouth, he said, "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Senior Lieutenant. I just didn't want those bastards to make your wife a widow. Besides, imagine how unpleasant it would be for our pilots to mess with your remains." The mechanic standing nearby met this remark with a burst of laughter. I patted the lanky fellow on the shoulder. We went to the pilot's room together. In the meantime, the others had landed. Everyone came back today. March 3rd, 1944. The Americans are bombing Hamburg. Specht cannot fly, and I was temporarily entrusted with the command of the squadron. We had 40 airplanes, and now there are 18 left. I took them into the air. Over Hamburg, I outlined a target, a small group of Boeings. My 18 planes were 1,500 metres above them. I prepared to dive, but I noticed about 1,000 metres down on the left, a group of 60 Mustangs. They cannot see us as we are between them and the blinding sun. This is real good luck. I drop my speed to give the Yanks some forward momentum. Wenneker's walks alongside, waving his arms and showing a thumbs up. He's absolutely thrilled. This is the first time we've been in a position where we can teach them a real lesson, but we have to be careful not to attack early. They still haven't spotted us. Let's go. In an almost vertical dive, we crashed into the middle of the Yankees and opened fire almost simultaneously. We took them by surprise. The Mustangs made wide turns and tried to get away. Some of them caught fire before they reached the clouds. One literally collapsed under the fire of my machine guns. Cries of triumph echoed over the airwaves. In the evening, I received word from Division Headquarters that the wreckage of no less than 12 Mustangs had been found in the Caesar Anton IV and Caesar Anton VII sectors. But there was a share of sadness to mar our immense joy. Baron did not return. Several Nalots saw a Messerschmitt 109 without wings, plummeting downward. What had happened to it? March 4th, 1944. News about Baran. He's in a hospital near Hamburg. A Mustang blew off both his wings, then his plane exploded. He was wounded but was able to parachute out. Of all the veterans, only Wenneker's and Fest were left with me. All the other pilots are young and inexperienced. They have only been with us since January. March 6th, 1944. Today we had a battle with thunderbolts south of Bremen. In the afternoon I took into the air for a test flight a pilot who had arrived in our formation yesterday. While flying at low altitude, he crashed to the ground and died. March 8th, 1944. Last night I heard the roar of many engines overhead. The British had thrown over 1,000 airplanes to bomb Berlin. At noon we went up to intercept the Americans heading for the same target. I am again in command of the squadron. After the first frontal attack, I shot down one Boeing and set fire to the second. Couldn't see it go down as several thunderbolts tried to get on my tail. My unit lost Sergeant Byte. His body was found in a cornfield north of the airfield where he was shot down. On the second intercept, I shot down another Boeing. It crashed to the ground after the first frontal attack, taking a line to the cockpit. Apparently both pilots were killed and the plane lost control, as it showed no signs of fire. During the next battle with the Thunderbolts, my plane took numerous holes, with serious damage to the engine and left wing. I barely made it to the airfield. Coming in for landing, I found out that I had no left landing gear. The right landing gear would not retract. I was forced to land on one landing gear. When I touched down on the landing strip, doctors and firefighters were already waiting there, ready to receive me, but their help was not needed. I managed to land. I immediately ordered a replacement airplane to be prepared for me to take to the air a third time, but it was damaged during the raid. 2 mechanics were seriously wounded. The 4th link provided me with an airplane on the order of the squadron commander. Specht and I took off together, with us Sergeants Hauptmann and Sergeant Zambelli, our wingmen. When we attempted to attack a group of liberators over Lüneburg Heath, we were suddenly attacked by about 40 thunderbolts. In the battle that broke out, both of our wingmen were shot down. The commander and I escaped with great difficulty. After landing, I received a message from Diepholz that Sergeant Wennekers was in the hospital, shot down and badly wounded. During the night, in a telephone conversation with division headquarters, the commander asked that the squadron be temporarily relieved from combat operations. We cannot continue. The request is denied. We have to carry out missions to the last plane and the last pilot. Berlin, the capital of the Reich, is on fire. There was dead silence in the pilot's room. Johnny Fest and I sat there in our chairs until late at night. We didn't talk much. The mountain of cigarette butts in the ashtray gradually grew as we smoked one cigarette after another. Johnny stared absent-mindedly at the portraits on the wall. It seemed to me that the faces were about to come alive, and we would hear the voices of our old comrades so close. Volney. We were returning from his funeral in the commander's car when a girl with a wreath of pine branches suddenly ran out onto the road. It was his fiancée. She was too shy to stand next to us at the grave because she was afraid that she would not be able to cope with the grief that had fallen on her when she learned of his death 3 days ago. Steiger was very much like his twin brother. I met him in Tübingen a year ago, and at first I thought he was Gerd. The resemblance was uncanny. Only Mother knew how to tell them apart. Kolbe. His body was found among the rubble, missing both arms. His wife asked for a wedding ring. How could we tell her the truth? Kramer. Why? Why did that boy lose his head when his plane crashed into the sea? Gerhard. His mother writes to me often, and I have to tell her all about her brave son. She hopes that his death for the freedom of our people and the welfare of the Reich will not be in vain. Fuhrmann. At the spot where his plane crashed into the swamp, we put up an oak cross. 2 coins of 5 francs have been placed on it. Delling did not return from his second flight. His body was swallowed by the sea. Killian. His endless affairs with women caused me a lot of trouble. Dolenga. What happened to his lovely wife? I was best man at their wedding in Java. Novotny. His father is in Brunn. He wrote to me that his other 2 sons were also killed in action. Radatz. His dear Mira Lydia shed many tears then, but soon found solace elsewhere. She wasn't the only woman who found his charms irresistible. Arndt never returned from his first combat mission. Reinhardt. My good old friend once showed me a picture of him with his 6 brothers, all in uniform, all with iron crosses of the 1st degree. Zambelli, playing the accordion. The last alarm caught him as he was singing a cheerful song with gusto. His accordion was still on the table when the survivors returned from the mission during which he had been killed. Weisgerber, Hetzel, Kreuger, White, Heffig, Trockels, Trendle. Johnny and I were the only ones left. March 15th, 1944, 9:55. Back in action. 6 planes took off, 4 came back. It's over. Several hundred thunderbolts and lightnings escorted over 1,000 heavy bombers. Johnny and I landed drenched in sweat. We had both been hit. We slumped back in our seats. Specht came in. The squadron is out of action for 6 weeks, he announced. I think we've earned that vacation. Johnny and I could only nod in response. As soon as the commander finished his cigarette and left the room, I pulled a bottle of brandy from my locker. 2 hours later, I pulled out a second bottle. The first one was already empty. Johnny and I are alone. Johnny was telling me about his girlfriend. She lives at his house in Wesel. I told him about Lilo. She's expecting our 2nd child in a month. Johnny has decided that he will have 4 children after he marries his girlfriend. Of course, if, he mumbled to himself, we'll be alive. When it got dark, we went into town. The alcohol took away the tension of the last few weeks and helped us forget. Let's celebrate this day properly, Johnny suggested. I liked that idea. I felt the same way and was ready for anything. There was no need to hold back now. I clapped Johnny heartily on the shoulder. Johnny, old boy, you're quite right. We're going to have a great party tonight. We walked down the street at a sluggish pace, singing songs. Luckily it was dark. No one could see us. Johnny knew a young widow in this town. We went to see her. She had a friend with her. We drank and danced as long as our legs would hold us. Nothing mattered, just to shut out everything, to forget for a moment. I spent the night in some strange bed. March 24th, 1944. When I returned to the airfield in the morning, I was greeted with loud shouts. "Happy birthday!" All the pilots of the unit lined up in a row, headed by the chief engineer. I walked along the line and shook hands with all my guys. I have known them all for several years. Every face is close to me. I know that they love me, and in my heart I am proud of them. I have always tried to create a sense of special camaraderie and unity in the link. And I succeeded. We are all united by one common ideal. 5. April 28th, 1944. To us comes a stream of new pilots assigned in recent weeks, with the exception of a sergeant arriving from the Eastern Front, where he was awarded the Iron Cross. They are all young, inexperienced NCOs, sent to us straight out of flight schools, and are totally unprepared to operate under combat conditions. But they have high morale and are excellently trained physically. I myself have conducted about 120 training flights with them. 2 of our veterans instructed them in blind flying. In addition, the rookies were thoroughly trained in bombing and gunnery. In mid-April, our good old Baran joined us after being discharged from the hospital. Brand new airplanes arrived to us straight from the factory. They are equipped with heavy-duty engines and a methane device. I tested the latter myself. It allows us to get increased power from the engine for a few minutes in an emergency. This power is obtained by injecting a mixture of methyl alcohol and water into the cylinders. I have a camera attached to my airplane again. Several excerpts from my recent filming appeared in the German Weekly Review, in newsreels shown in movie theatres all over the country. The 5 are back in action. From April 15 to April 20th, I was sent to the experimental airfield in Lechfeld, where I flew for the first time on a jet plane, Me-262. On a conventional model in horizontal flight, I reached a speed of 1,500 kilometers per hour. 1,000 of these airplanes are to be delivered to the troops by the end of the year. God save Tommy and the Yanks. A few weeks ago at Zwischenahn, I saw Major Specht in an Me-163. In 3 minutes, he climbed to an altitude of 8,000 meters. They say this plane can reach speeds of 1,700 kilometers per hour. Back in 1941, he already had a speed of 1,500 kilometers per hour. The design of other new models is progressing rapidly. The German aviation industry is working very efficiently. However, the Americans bomb our factories every day. Will they be able to stop the production of airplanes before new machines are delivered in sufficient numbers? Depending on the answer to this question will decide the outcome of the war in the skies, getting a deadly race against time. The outlook is dark. Day by day, the situation on the Eastern Front is deteriorating. The operation in Africa failed in March. 120,000 German soldiers imprisoned, all of them perfectly trained and experienced fighters. The situation in Italy became critical. As allies, the Italians are completely useless and unreliable. They always have been. From the west, we expect the Americans to land on the continent. In a matter of months, the squadron completed the final preparations for Operation Dr. Gustav Wilhelm. Every pilot has undergone extensive theoretical training for anti-landing operations. It was enough to press the alarm button to activate the vast forces in the west. This morning, Major Specht was appointed commander of the 11th Air Group. He was awarded the Knight's Cross a few days ago. I have been appointed to succeed him as commander of the 2nd Squadron of the 11th Air Group. I have also been recommended for early promotion to the rank of captain for fearlessness in the face of the enemy. Apparently, at my age of 23, I am the youngest squadron commander in the German Air Force at this time. Little Specht, smiling, shook my hand 3 times and congratulated me, first on my promotion to captain, second on my appointment to a new position, third on Lilo giving me a second daughter. Today is a beautiful day. The sun is shining and the clouds are somewhere far away on the horizon. April 29th, 1944. A cluster of enemy planes in the Dora Dora sector. We're in the air again. The renewed squadron is ready for battle. 3 divisions of bombers are approaching from Yarmouth. Our bases in Holland are reporting a heavy fighter escort. My orders are to meet the fighters, engage, distract. Squadrons of Focke-Wulfs, meanwhile, can freely attack the bombers. 10 Dazi. The squadron is on alert. To my plane is a telephone line from the Divisional Surveillance Service. Reports on the enemy's whereabouts are coming in continuously. They've passed Amsterdam, the southern tip of Isil Bay, north of Deventer, have crossed the Reich border west of the Rhine, 11 Uhr. "Squadron to take off! Squadron to take off!" thundered the loudspeaker. Flares soared into the air. The engines roared. We're in the air. One link after another rose into the air and turned to the left, lining up in a single tight formation. I turned on the radio and contacted the base. "Babies in the Gustav Quelle sector. Move to Honey 80. I acknowledged the reception. Continuing to gain altitude, heading left. 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 metres. Next to us are other squadrons. They're mostly Focke-Wulfs. They're now in the Gustav Siegfried and Honey 80 sector. I confirmed the reception. Altitude 10,000 metres. The new compressors are excellent. 11:30. At a lower altitude to the west of us, I noticed exhaust trails. It's the Lightnings. In a few minutes they're right below us, followed by the bombers. They're flying in formation, stretching all the way to the horizon. Thunderbolts and Mustangs flying around them. Our Focke-Wulfs moved towards them. At the same time I spiked on the Lightnings below me. They noticed us and turned in our direction, meeting the attack. A group of Thunderbolts, about 30 planes, also headed in our direction. This is exactly what I need. Now the road Focke-Wulfs is open. One of the Boeings is already on fire. Major Moritz has entered the battle with his attack squadron. A fierce battle has been joined by ours. We'd done our job. Now it was every man for himself. I was on the tail of a Lightning for a few minutes. He was dodging like the devil, turning, diving, soaring upward almost like a rocket. I could only get a few shots off. The Mustangs are attacking from the rear. Tracer bursts past right over my head. I went sharply upward. My wingman, Sergeant Drouet, is right behind me. I got the opportunity to shoot at Lightning again. I finally hit it. Smoke came out of his right engine, but I was forced to move out of that position. When I looked back, I saw 8 Thunderbolts hanging on my tail. The lines whistled over my head again. My opponents are clearly very experienced. I made all kinds of manoeuvres, turned on the gas pedal, tried to get away with my favourite vertical corkscrew, but after a few seconds the bastards are right on my tail again. They're firing all the time. I don't understand how they missed me, but that's what happened. My wingman followed me like a glue stick, next to or just behind me. I ordered him to stay there. He quietly confirmed the command. At last I had the good fortune to catch the Yankee in my sights. I opened fire with all machine guns and cannon. The American went sharply upward, and all his comrades sat on my tail. Despite the bitter cold, sweat rolls down my face. It's a living hell. For a moment I'm pressed into the seat on a steep curve, and a few seconds later I'm already hurtling downward, hanging from the seat belt and practically touching my head to the hood, my stomach rising to my throat. Time seemed to have stopped. During this time, the Focke-Wulfs had done a fine job. I saw about 30 flaming Boeings going down. But there are still a few hundred left, stubbornly continuing eastward. Berlin is in for another hot day. The arrow on the gauge shows that the fuel has run out. The red light is flashing. In no more than 10 minutes, my tank will be empty. As I dive, I make a turn. The thunderbolts disappeared. Descending to the clouds at an altitude of 1,000 metres, I gradually levelled the plane. I determined that I was probably not far from Brunswick or Hildesheim. I looked at my watch. Maybe in 45 minutes I'll be up to the bombers again. Maybe I can get to the fat-bellied Yankee. The sky is still streaked with streaks of exhaust, evidence of a fierce battle. Suddenly, my wingman swerved and disappeared into the clouds. What the hell? I instantly turned around and instinctively ducked my head. A thunderbolt was on my tail, followed by 7 more. They opened fire simultaneously, riddling my car. My right wing caught fire. I dove into the clouds. A shadow flashed ahead. It was a thunderbolt. I fired a line. Its tail burst into flames. I could already see the ground. I opened the hatch and prepared to jump. The line went right over my ear and echoed with several heavy blows to my flaming airplane. The thunderbolt again, 30 metres behind me. Damn it. I'm going to get hit by its propeller if I jump now. I ducked as low as I could in my seat, trying to keep my head down behind the armour plate behind me. The wings and fuselage are riddled with rounds. There's a big hole gaping at my right leg. The flames are getting closer. I can feel the heat. A bang. The dashboard shattered in front of my face. Something hit me in the head. My engines shut down, out of fuel. What do? My speed, of course, is dropping fast. This prevented my opponent from hitting me, and he was in front of me. For only a few seconds he appeared in my scope, a chance to take him with me. I squeezed the throttles. I was pounding with tension. I just had to hit it. My volley hit the target in the centre of his fuselage. The plane rushed upward, leaving a streak of smoke behind it. It was engulfed in flames. The hatch opened and the pilot jumped. The ground hurtles towards me. It's too late to jump. I'm over some field. The flames burn my face. I hit the ground with a thud. Clods of earth and clouds of dust fly into the air. The car skidded, sinking deep into the ground like a grave. I covered my face with my hand and braced myself with my feet. Everything happened fast, a terrible blow to the head. This is the end, was my last thought before I lost consciousness. I don't remember how I crawled out from under the burning rubble. I could not think coherently. I was completely restrained by this terrible pain in my head. I remember bullets whizzing by me as the ammunition exploded. I staggered and fell, but got up again. My only thought was to get far away before the plane exploded. It was consumed by fire, bright flames against a background of black smoke. A few 100 metres away, the wreckage of another plane burned. Through the fog in my head, I realised it was my Yankee. Just wish the pain in my head would subside. I wrapped my arms around my head and knelt down. Everything was spinning before my eyes. I vomited relentlessly until I was vomiting green liquid. Eventually, I rolled into a shallow ditch and passed out again. I think I had already. When I regained consciousness, I noticed a man standing still and looking at me. He was a young, slender man, American. I tried to sit on the edge of the pit. The long-haired Yankee sat down beside me. At first we were silent. All I could do was rest my elbows on my knees and put my arms around my head, which was splitting with pain. He offered me a cigarette. I thanked him, declined, and in turn offered him my cigarettes. He declined too, and we each lit our own cigarette. "You were flying a Messerschmitt?" I confirmed in my terrible English. "Are you wounded?" "I think so." "There's blood on the back of your head. I could feel it myself." The Yankee continued, "How did you hit me?" I looked at him askance. "I don't know how you did it. Your plane was burning like a torch." "I don't know." The tall American told me how he spotted me above the clouds and chased me with his comrades. "We thought we were very lucky," he added. I in turn asked, "Why were you ahead when my engine stopped?" "I had too much speed. Besides, I could not assume that you would be able to shoot." "That was your mistake." He grinned. I guess I'm not the first person you've shot down. No, you're my 26th. The American told me that he had shot down 17 Germans. A few days later, he was going home. He noticed the ring on my finger and asked if I was married. Yes, I have 2 small children. I showed him a picture of Lilo and Ingrid. Very cute, he remarked with a nod. Really, really cute. I was glad he liked my girls. He's married, too. Now his wife will wait for him in vain. He nervously asked what would happen to him. I said he would be sent to a special camp for captured American pilots. Are you an officer? Yes, Captain. In that case, you'll be sent to an officers' camp. You'll be treated well. We treat our prisoners as well as you treat yours. We chatted amicably for about half an hour. He seemed like a nice guy. There was no animosity between us, not even a hint of it. We have too much in common. We're both pilots, and we both just narrowly escaped death. Suddenly we were surrounded by soldiers with machine guns. "Put your guns away, you morons!" I shouted at them. A truck was waiting for us on the road. 6 Americans were already sitting there. Their faces were grim. My captain and I sat down beside them. Despite the excruciating pain, I tried to cheer them up and told a few jokes. On the road, we picked up several other Americans who had been shot down. One of them was seriously wounded in the leg. I saw the soldiers gently put him in the car. We arrived at Brunswick Airfield in Brootsum. There I said goodbye to my travelling companions and we shook hands. Good luck, all the best, spoke each in his own language. An hour later, Baron arrived and took me to Arado. There were no casualties in the squadron. I'm the only one who was shot down. Later, at headquarters, I lost consciousness again. I was carried to my apartment and had a high fever. At night I was taken to the hospital. I was taken June 10th, 1944. Several terrible weeks passed. The doctors determined a fracture of the base of the skull. I suffered a hemorrhage in the skull and received some nerve damage. For several days I could not utter a word. Even now my speech has not fully recovered. My memory was affected. I still get agitated very easily. They even wanted to send me to a psychiatric hospital. I refused. It could have really driven me crazy. A few days ago, the Allies landed in Normandy. My squadron was sent there under the command of my old comrade, Captain Krupinski. I called the 2nd Fighter Division and asked permission to return to the squadron immediately. The general refused. Knoke, your first priority now is to get yourself in shape. You cannot be sent into combat yet. I will not allow you to commit suicide by sending you into a combat zone. You need to think about your family, he retorted sharply. Yesterday I underwent a full medical examination at the Air Force Hospital. The result shocked me. I am completely unfit to fly. The Russians are advancing unstoppably on Germany's eastern borders. Our troops in Russia are exsanguinated. Our divisions have been fighting there without respite since 1941. The reinforcements that were sent there have been transferred to the Western Front, July 20th, 1944. An assassination attempt has been made on the Führer. The German people are outraged beyond belief. What were the aims of the conspirators? Ordinary German soldiers regard this unsuccessful attempt at rebellion as the most shameful betrayal. We saw all too well the consequences of the Nazi regime with its stupidity and arbitrariness. We realized that the situation in the Reich left much to be desired. Correcting this unsatisfactory state of affairs is the first task of German soldiers after the end of the war. But other things await us now. The most pressing problem now is Germany. The very existence of the Reich is at stake. August 6, 1944. I spent the last 2 months in the mountains near Tegernsee. My wounds have healed and I have made a fine recovery. Constantly thinking about my comrades, going through difficulties, dangers now, almost ashamed to be living here as a lord in his castle. I learned today that Johnny Fest was killed in action, shot down by thunderbolts. It's terrible news. August 10th, 1944. The 2-day medical examination ended in another disappointment. I am not fit to fly. My medical records, including the board's report, were handed to me with instructions to give them to the doctor of the new unit to which I would be assigned. I'll forget to do that. Memory loss has its positive side. August 11th, 1944. My former squadron returned to Wunsdorf for a short rest. I went there to visit my old friend Krupinski. Then I reported to division headquarters that I had been discharged from the hospital and was ready for further service. I received orders to go to France with my former squadron to take command of the 3rd Squadron, 1st Air Group, August 12, 1944. In the evening we transferred to Wiesbaden with 74 airplanes. Krupinski was forced to parachute down but the road when his airplane caught fire. He was wounded and sent to the hospital, so I temporarily took command of the squadron going to Wiesbaden, August 13, 1944. The order to go to the front line came very late. It was almost dark when we landed in a wheat field that was being used as an airfield. Senior Lieutenant Kirschner was killed by crashing into a pole in the dark. Surprisingly, the others landed safely. A great cloud of whining went up as each plane landed. At night I arrived at the 3rd Squadron, 1st Air Group, to take command of my new cohort. To my amazement, I found myself succeeding Captain Voitka, my first combat commander. We shook hands, the years seemed to run backwards, and I was once again a young and inexperienced pilot reporting to him on my first combat assignment to 2nd Squadron, 52nd Fighter Group. He laughed when he saw my surprised face. I was sure that this old soldier, with his vast experience, now had the rank of at least colonel. He had been shot down a few days ago and was wounded. The impression of this giant's imposing appearance was heightened by the fact that his left arm and chest were bandaged. Apparently, his long-standing penchant for excessive drinking had not found favour with the Air Force High Command. During the night, he handed over command of the squadron to me. August 14th, 1944. Early in the morning, I took to the air with my wingman. Over Repnoy, we came upon 6 thunderbolts. Coming up out of the clouds, I managed to shoot down one. It exploded in mid-air. I immediately dived into the clouds and headed for the base. Down on the road below, I saw a convoy of jeeps with small trailers. We descended and attacked them from a strafing flight. One of the jeeps caught fire and went down in a ditch. We made 2 more sorties during the evening, escorting our fighter bombers attacking American positions northwest of Rennes, August 15, 1944. The weather is very hot and sweltering. We are again escorting our fighter bombers. In the battle that ensued, I brought my personal score to 28 by shooting down another Thunderbolt. In all, we made 6 combat sorties today. August 16, 1944. The Spitfires attacked our runway and the 10th Squadron airfield, but did not do much damage. I went up in pursuit with a group of my planes and shot down 1 Spitfire over Etampe. 2 more combat sorties were flown today, but without much success. We attacked an Allied transport convoy, August 17, 1944. At Tenerife, an enemy scout appeared over us at a time when several of our planes were landing. The rascal is going to target us with his bombers. Sure enough, an hour later, 8 fighter bombers appeared, and they attacked our planes from strafing, destroying 1. The dust had not yet settled, and I was already in the air, rolling my plane out of the camouflaged hangar and pursuing the attackers. Suddenly I saw a lightning. It was alone, probably a scout. Over the village of Ozonet, I shot it down. In the evening, when we were coming in for a landing, having returned from a mission to attack the advancing American tanks, the runway suddenly bristled with fountains of earth. In the sky, rippling with heat, I spotted about 12 marauders. We attacked them, even though we had very little fuel left. 3 were shot down by my guys. I shot down the 4th. We are forced to land at Bretty. Our landing strip is riddled with deep potholes. During the night, the squadron is transferred to Maroles, August 18, 1944. From Itamia, the Americans moved forward toward the Seine, north of Paris. Our air group is ordered to relocate to Valais, east of Soissons. Immediately organised a ground group to receive incoming aircraft. With my 40 airplanes, I attacked an enemy column near Avrennes, together with other links of our air wing. Over Lisieux, I shot down a Mustang. 5 minutes later, a second Mustang fell under my machine gun fire, August 19, 1944. Once upon a time, I counted the years of my life by the number of years. Now it's different. This summer is a nightmare from which there is no escape. The heat is stifling. Death is reaping its monstrous harvest. I dodge its scythe every day. The worst part of it all is waiting for that scythe to catch up with me, as it has caught up with others, experiencing these endless hours, turning into days, stretching one after another. I am not afraid of death itself. It will be instantaneous. I've been in the crosshairs of it many times in the past, so I know. The worst part is waiting for the blow and not knowing when it will come. Between sorties, I either lie around my tent or slowly float down in a boat on the Aisne River, which is a few meters from my headquarters. The water is crystal clear, and I try to hunt with a small sharpie for fish that slip between the rocks. The strong predatory fish lashes out in agony at the tip of my spear, whipping the blood-coloured water into the air. When it's my turn, it will be much faster. I have become very silent. I do not talk to anyone unless absolutely necessary, and even then only with my adjutant, the head of the medical unit or the head of the housekeeping department. My adjutant, an Austrian of the rank of captain, is old enough to be my father. Our doctor is a libertine. He thinks of nothing but his own comfort and women. The head of the housekeeping department talks incessantly, never shutting up for a minute. We haven't gotten personal mail in a long time. That's a good thing. There will be letters from Lilo with news of the house, of the children. It's best not to bring it up right now. I miss Johnny Festus. He'd be with me now. That tall red-haired boy. Why should he and all the others have fallen victim to death's scythe? The sun has been scorching lately. Every time I close the hood before takeoff, I feel like I'm closing my coffin lid. I'm drenched in sweat. When I return, my shirt is completely stuck to my body. Each day feels like an eternity. There is nothing left, only the endless hell of fighting and waiting, the soul-weary anticipation of the blow that will inevitably come sooner or later. The night brings no relief. It is short, stuffy and oppressive. No relaxation. No. At 3 every day my phone rings. It's from the air group headquarters. I receive a combat mission for the day. To patrol the territory, escort fighter bombers, attack such and such ground targets in such and such a sector. Then I get a report from the chief mechanic on the condition of the equipment. There are fewer airplanes every day. Today the squadron was ordered to attack targets north of Paris. The Americans have advanced to the Seine from the Lisieux-Argens sector. South of Paris, they've already crossed the river. We took to the air 4 times. And 4 times I couldn't reach the target because we were intercepted by enemy fighters far outnumbered. I have acquired some supernatural sense of confidence in aerial combat. I probably have the instinct of a born hunter. I act calmly and deliberately, as if guided by an invisible hand. There's nothing heroic about it. Every time I catch an enemy plane in my sights, it invariably makes some simple tactical blunder. I watch him crash, coldly and dispassionately, without any euphoria watching his death. Today I shot down 3 thunderbolts that way. I was lucky. But what's the use? 5 of our planes didn't come back. That's very bad for us. For us, the loss of 5 airplanes or 5 pilots is equivalent to the loss of 50 airplanes for the enemy. August 28, 1944. The enemy tried to force the Seine on the pontoon bridges between Vernon and Mantel. They are carrying out continuous air cover together with a dense barrage of anti-aircraft guns. Yesterday, in 6 sorties in the area, the squadron lost 12 aircraft. This is the end. This morning, according to the report in the squadron, remained 4 airworthy machines. 2 more planes with skewed fuselages are only fit for non-combat flights. I can't send my guys into combat on ancient wrecks. And at Sixil I got a call from the Corps Chief of Staff. He angrily reprimanded me. This morning you reported that you have only 4 suitable aircraft, but I've learned that you have 2 more. Are you out of your mind? Do you realize the reality of the situation? I consider this to be sabotage, and I won't stand for it. All your planes must fly. That's an order. He roared like a bull. I hadn't gotten such a beating since I'd graduated from flight school, and I was so furious I could barely control my anger. Why should I put up with that monkey's antics? He dared to accuse me of sabotage. I'm sick of the cabinet strategists and heroes at headquarters. They know nothing about the problems at the front, which we face every day. They do not care. I decided to fly myself in one of these bobtails and sent my wingman, Corporal Deering, in the other. We were ordered to take off at Étilly and rendezvous with the other squadrons of our air group over Soissons. I am to take command of the entire group. 2 minutes before X hour, the engines rumbled. We rolled out of cover and into the wind. There was no runway, just a loose field. My wreck rolled rumbling across the field, struggling to gain speed. I barely managed to get the thing into the air before it dodged the trees at the far end of the field. Deering began to gain altitude too sharply, and his engine stalled. The left wing of his plane broke off, and he crashed into the trees. A column of flames erupted. Deering died instantly. There were 5 of us left. The order of the Chief of Corps Staff is worse than insanity. It leads only to death. The base reports that other squadrons cannot take to the air because they are bombed by enemy planes. Move to the Siegfried Gustav sector. North of Soissons lies the small town of Ternier. There, at the intersection of the Somme Canal and the River Ouas, is a large railroad junction. This place catches the eye from a great distance. Here, the 3rd Squadron of the 1st Fighter Air Group will have its last battle against the Americans over French territory. We met here more than 60 Thunderbolts and Mustangs. There was no escape. It's certain death. I can only give the order to attack. That way, we can achieve at least a moral victory. The base is still trying to transmit orders. I've turned off the comms. To hell with them all now. My plane can't get above 3,000 meters. He can barely move and he's not listening to me very well. I'm sure this is its last flight. The fight didn't last more than a few minutes. Corporal Wagner was shot down first. He couldn't escape. I saw another plane engulfed in fire. Sergeant Freigang had time to jump. The next moment his wingman went down. Only Sergeant Ickes, my wingman, and I were left. There's no way out. If this is the end, I'll sell my life as dearly as I can. I'll go for the ram and take one of the Americans with me. Tracer rounds come at us from all sides. The shells rain down on my plane like hail, and it gradually loses speed. Ickes keeps right behind me. I'm making shallow circles. There's a Mustang on my tail. I can't shake it off. My plane is so slow, like it's too tired to fly any further. Several more bursts pierce my fuselage from behind. With one last engine effort, I lifted the airplane sharply upward, then dropped speed. The American had not expected this. He missed and was now in front of me and just below me. I could clearly see the pilot's face as he turned around. He had entered the dive too late. I'm right on top of him. If I don't hit him, I can ram him. I feel a chilling cold. The distance is closing fast, only a few meters between us. My line hits his fuselage. I try to hit the pilot. His engine catches fire. We're going together. I felt a strong jolt from the first impact and saw my right wing fall off. A moment later, I threw back the hatch and jumped. A fierce wave of flame surged up behind me. The 2 explosions merged into one fireball. A few moments later, my parachute opened. Not far from me, just above me, another parachute opened. It's Ickes. Above us, the Americans were circling like crazy. It took them a few minutes to find out that there was not a single Messerschmitt left in the sky. I landed in a clearing in the woods. I don't know whether I am on the German side or behind enemy lines, so I hid in the thick undergrowth. The Americans had flown west. I gladly relaxed, lit a cigarette and lay back on my parachute, drawing in the fragrant smoke. As a precaution, I removed my epaulettes from my shoulders and slipped the gold cross into my pocket. I wear a plain leather jumpsuit, a dark blue silk t-shirt, worn pants and black shoes. I look so un-Prussian that no one would immediately recognize me as a German. My caution was soon justified. About 15 minutes after my landing, I noticed 4 French civilians at the other end of the clearing. They were gesticulating animatedly. With my high school French, I could understand that they were looking for me. Each of them wants to look in different places. I realized that they think an American has fallen. All 4 of them are armed. They are clearly underground terrorists of the French resistance movement. I reached for the pistol in the pocket of my leather jumpsuit. The 4 began combing through the bushes. Sooner or later they would discover me. So I decided to walk out towards them. They looked at me in surprise, pointing their automatic rifles at me. Now I must be calm and judicious. The French violently hate us Germans with all their temperamental souls. I do not condemn them, no doubt I would feel the same in their place. But if those scoundrels guessed that I was a German, I'd be in trouble. I calmly went out to meet them and greeted them in English as friendly as possible. "Hello, boys." The tense faces gradually blurred into smiles. They took me for a Yankee. With as American an accent as possible, I asked them in very bad French to help me find my comrades. They began to explain to me where I was. American Sherman tanks are about 1.5 kilometers away. We have to be careful because the area is still swarming with those lousy bots. Battles are taking place on all sides of us. Indeed, now for the first time I heard the rumble of cannonade. The tallest of the Frenchmen, with the most repulsive appearance, is holding a German machine gun. I don't like the look in his eyes at all. He stands behind me, suspiciously quiet. Maybe he doubts that I am who I say I am. We walked through the dense forest until we came to the railroad tracks. Suddenly we heard the crack of a German machine gun. I think it was an MG-45, and very close. The Frenchman flopped to the ground. The tall bandit remained standing behind me. He obviously does not want to lose sight of me. From the other side of the railroad came the rumble of tank engines. I asked where the convoy was going. "Amiens." "Amiens? Did I really get that far during the battle? The city's been in American hands for some time now, damn it. I don't want to spend the rest of the war as a prisoner in America. I've learned that the nearest town is Nessel, so the Somme Canal is somewhere to the north. According to this morning's intelligence reports, it's under our control. I need to move north. But how am I going to get rid of those damn frogs? There's the heavy rumble of gunfire. It's coming from the west. The Frenchmen cautiously cross the tracks and wave to me, urging me to follow them. Longshanks is behind me with his automatic rifle, or I would have dashed into the woods and gone my way north. After walking a few hundred meters, we came to a road. It is straight as an arrow. You can see ahead for several kilometers. The crackle of cues was heard again on the left. 3 Frenchmen cautiously crossed the road. Longshanks took 2 or 3 steps after them, then turned to me. Our eyes met. I think he had guessed. "I've got to go. There'll be no second chance, now or ever." I ran back toward the forest. Longshanks was after me before the others realized what was happening. He started shooting. I jumped into the hollow. Fountains of earth surged up around me. The Frenchman's clip is empty. He's forced to distract himself to reload. I have enough time to pull out my gun and take aim. I jump to my feet and fire. He fell with a bullet in his head. I picked up his machine gun. "Sorry, my friend, but he who shoots first lives longer." Breathing heavily, I rushed into the woods. The branches whipped me in the face. The other 3 Frenchmen were left behind. 15 minutes later, I came across our patrol. In Shawnee, an Air Force officer provided me with his car. It was not until late at night that I returned to my airfield. I arrived at the old French chateau that houses our headquarters. My adjutant, Captain Marshall, the medical chief, the chief mechanic, Captain Wessels, and the chief of staff are seated at the dinner table. They greeted my return with shouts of delight. Their faces darkened when I told them of the fate of our comrades. I hadn't finished my story when I got a call from headquarters. He has bad news. Enemy tanks suddenly attacked Soissons and Fissem. Fierce fighting broke out in the vicinity of these towns. One of the American armoured groups is only a few kilometres from our airfield. Other enemy units cut us off to the east. In the north, the enemy is putting heavy pressure on Lyon. If the offensive on Lyon is not stopped, we will be in a difficult position. I should immediately sound the alarm in all links and give orders to evacuate to an airfield near the place of Beaumont in Belgium. A few days ago, I was there on reconnaissance to map out the airfield in case of evacuation. Our preparatory party is stationed there. We worked hard all night. 6 hours after the evacuation order, the airfield was empty. Aircraft parking lots, squadron headquarters, mobile repair shops, all dismantled. 128 trucks are already moving towards Beaumont, taking all equipment and over 600 men. I ordered each vehicle to move singly to avoid an air attack on the convoy. The few roads not yet blocked by the enemy are jammed with vehicles with retreating units. The French, the occupants of our chateau, put on their Sunday attire and prepared to greet the American liberators with baskets of fruit and flowers. They were terrified when American tanks began shelling the building. As a beautiful French girl in her best outfit was serving me breakfast, a shell hit the tower of the chateau. The enemy occupied the nearest village, 2 kilometres to the south. Just an hour ago, there was the headquarters of the 8th Link. Our infantry is retreating under cover of tanks towards Valley. Collected the last meters of telephone cable. The last truck has reached the bridge over the Aisne. On the hill, I turned around for one last look at our abandoned airfield. As far as I could see, the bridges behind us had been blown up. My fast Ford V8 is well adapted to looping around the jammed road between cars. The town of Lyon was bombed just an hour before we arrived. Now it's on fire. German columns are piled up on the approaches to the town, continuously under attack by bombers and attack planes. They are practically defenceless. Everywhere you can see burning cars. For several hours we took shelter in the woods, waiting out the attack. It was already dark before we drove through the burning streets of Lyon. One question plagued me. What had become of my boys? We drove at night with the headlights on. It required a lot of exertion. From time to time I took over the driver's seat, endless convoys pillared up on the road, cars breaking down and stopping, French resistance activists dot the road with nails and small contact mines. I'm glad I ordered brushes to be attached to the front of the wheels to protect the tyres. By the end of the day I felt wrecked. The fatigue and nervous tension of the past 2 days had finally taken its toll. I pulled off the road into the woods. In a few minutes I was already sleeping like a dead man. September 1st, 1944. All the cars of our squadron reached Beaumont. Despite the incessant bombing and assault raids by day and attacks by French resistance terrorists at night, not a single car was missing. I am deeply shocked both by the reports I have received of the deteriorating situation and by what I have seen with my own eyes over the past 2 days on French roads. I think it is impossible to organize effective resistance to the enemy's advance. A few SS armoured units and paratroopers continue to desperately resist, but our troops as a whole have lost morale. I am disgusted to watch our occupation troops retreat without a thought of resistance, after they have stood in France for several years. Personal safety is the concern of the civilian and military administration. The retreat has degenerated into a cowardly, panic-stricken flight to avoid confrontation with the enemy at all costs. For years, these officers and officials enjoyed a luxurious, parasitic life in France. The notion of military duty was forgotten. Bags and suitcases are what clog the roads. Their cars are laden with bundles of loot. Often they're travelling with their French girlfriends, also eager to loot. If we lose this campaign, French women must bear the greatest responsibility. Nights of passion and debauchery have undermined the morale of our soldiers and officers. They are no longer willing to sacrifice their lives for the glory of the fatherland, thanks to the energetic efforts of professional whores and lovers of the sweet life. By doing so, we would at least show our respect for the soldiers fighting heroically in the East. The fate of my squadron has not yet been decided. I have now received orders to set up a new airfield near the Manche. I have approximately 1,000 soldiers and another 1,000 Belgian maintenance men. September 10th, 1944. So far, I have not received any new planes or pilots. A few days ago, the squadron was transferred to Westerwald. I conducted several operations with the staff officers. In these battles, I have had the opportunity to increase my ever-increasing score. Here in Germany, perfect chaos reigns since Reichsführer SS Himmler took command of the reserve forces. The Führer seems to be handing over command of the armed forces to the leaders of his political party, removing the military leaders. Hitler's fame as the greatest military genius of all time, spread at the beginning of the war, is slowly but surely fading. He would have acted wiser by leaving the conduct of the fighting to experienced generals. A few days ago, I attended a conference with General Galland, commander of fighter aviation. Perhaps my squadron will be disbanded altogether in view of the extreme difficulty of rebuilding it. The production of our airplanes is seriously hampered by Allied air attacks. Almost all factories are destroyed, and the lack of fuel further limits our capabilities. Moreover, the difficulty is the question of squadron manning. The vast majority of experienced pilots are either dead or wounded. In the west and in the east, our front line is moving back a little every day. Now we are waiting for a new secret weapon. We fighter pilots in particular are really looking forward to the advent of jet airplanes. According to Hitler's idiotic order of a few weeks ago, the first jets to come off the assembly line will be used exclusively as weapons of retaliation. Hitler angrily rejected the protests of all levels of fighter aviation commanders, Galland and even Göring. We are forbidden to discuss the possibility of using the jet engine in aerial combat. German aviation is slowly bleeding to death in defense of the Reich. Our cities, factories are completely destroyed. They are virtually defenseless against the methodical bombing of the British and Americans. Meanwhile, the only thing Hitler can think of is retaliation. If we were given at least 1 or 2 air groups equipped with new Me-262, we would have a good chance to remedy the situation. Otherwise, the air war will be lost. October 2nd, 1944. 2 days ago, I was assigned to the 8th Fighter Division. My squadron has been transferred near Vienna. I am here to get replenishment and airplanes before going to fight in Hungary. I had a wonderful meeting today. The Major General, the Division Chief of Staff, invited me to headquarters to introduce me to the division chiefs. In the intelligence department, I met the one I least expected to meet. Senior Lieutenant Gunther Gerhard. I couldn't believe my eyes. This is an old friend of mine who, as I was informed, died more than 2 years ago. Gunther was also informed that I had been killed in a fierce battle in the West. This was one of the happiest surprises of the war for me. At my request, Gunther was immediately assigned to my squadron, replacing Captain Marshall as my adjutant. My old friend was thrilled to change the oppressive atmosphere at headquarters to the clean air of a combat unit. October 7th, 1944. During the past few days, I have been receiving constant replenishment. The pilots assigned to my squadron were reporting to headquarters. Among them were several familiar faces, pilots who had returned to combat after hospitalization. Some of them had flown bombers before their units were disbanded. Our planes should arrive within a few days. I can only hope that they will be jet machines. October 9th, 1944. All my hopes for future operations dissipated today. Shortly after midnight, I received orders by telephone to proceed to Anklam in northern Germany. I personally must go there in advance by automobile and report to the command staff of the fighter air force convened by Reichsmarschall Göring. After I gave the necessary orders, but the squadron at 3 Biosiulio, together with Senior Lieutenant Gerhard and the driver, went on the road. We have 36 hours to reach Anklam via Prague, Dresden and Berlin. We stocked up on fuel for the whole trip, as we were not sure we would be able to refuel on the way. Around 4 p.m. we stopped for a short rest at a hotel in a Czech village, ordering a cup of coffee. After resting, I got behind the wheel, and we continued on our way. We had not gone a kilometre when, losing control, the car exploded. We hit the parapet of a bridge. Gerhard, who was sitting next to me, was thrown out of the car and broke his leg. The driver got out of the car, then lost consciousness. I myself was pinned to the seat. I was wounded. Shrapnel had hit my leg. Blood was oozing from my boots. In desperation, I tried to get out from under the wreckage. I heard the noise of another approaching car, then an explosion. There was a terrible bang. The Volkswagen hit our car. It was swept off the road and into a deep ditch on the other side. With desperate efforts, I finally got out of the car. My left knee was shattered, as was my right hip. Lying on my back, I slowly crawled, pushing off with my elbows, trying to reach the hole in the curb. 2 hours passed before the SS picked us up. The driver of the second car is dead. Disasters with both cars, as it turned out, caused by the explosion of magnetic mines. This is the work of the Czech underground terrorist movement. During the night, we were taken to an Air Force hospital where Ponta and I underwent immediate surgeries. My left leg was swollen and white. The surgeon at first wanted to amputate it, as he had no hope of saving it. I was in total despair. I didn't want to spend the rest of my days crippled. It took 2.5 hours of work to get my knee in relative order. I was splinted on both legs, and then finally sent to the room where Gunther was already lying, who also had a splint on one leg. He had several other serious injuries. I asked one of the nurses to fetch my bag and got out a bottle of brandy, which Gunther and I drained in a few minutes. I felt no pain at all that night. December 3rd, 1944. For 8 weeks, 8 long, endless weeks, I lay in bed and could not move. Gunther lay in the next bed. The days were monotonously followed by agonizing nights. The wounds on my left knee healed. My right leg is gradually getting shorter. I'll have to live with it. The doctor has promised to let me stand up soon. The splints will be removed tomorrow morning. December 4th, 1944. I had my tyres removed early this morning. Both of my legs have become terribly thin. My right knee felt stiff. I was so weak I could hardly sit up on the bed. I wanted to take a step to see if I could get up, if I could walk eventually. But every time I tried to get up, I got dizzy. December 7th, 1944. 2 days ago I took my first steps, leaning on crutches, and walked across the ward. Yesterday I ventured out into the corridor. Today I will go for a short walk to the Moldau River. I have to walk again. Even if I have to start all over again like a small child, I am ready for it. December 10th, 1944. Every day I take slightly longer walks. With the help of one of my sisters, I reached the theatre. It is a 10-minute walk for a healthy person, but my journey took over an hour. My hands are covered with sores and blisters, but I am making obvious progress. December 12th, 1944. I was sent to a resort in the Austrian Alps for radon treatment. The immobility in my left knee is gradually going away, but my right leg still feels nothing. It hangs on my injured thigh and has become shorter by more than 5 centimetres. I spend a lot of time in long and tiring walks with crutches in the snow. Every day I take radon baths, which are supposed to stimulate the muscles and joints. December 16th, 1944. The war reports are just murderous. I am marking the enemy advances west and east on my map and have come to the conclusion that victory is unattainable. I do not believe that the war will end with clear results or that there will be a real winner. The only possible victory is the establishment of a lasting peace. I don't see how a lasting peace can be achieved as long as Bolshevism exists. The day will come when they will want to conquer the entire world based on the communist theory of world revolution. The price that will be paid for this is the enslavement of all nations, of all mankind. December 19th, 1944. Lilo managed to get me transferred to the naval hospital in Sunderbush, later taken over by the Canadian Army as the 7th Canadian Army Hospital. It is located just a few kilometres from Java. We have a charming little house that Lilo has turned into a cosy nest. That's where she is waiting for me now with our children. We want to be together no matter what happens during the last hard days of the war. December 21st, 1944. I began to walk even more stubbornly on crutches for the sake of my relatives. My only wish is to get home as soon as possible. For me, a cripple, the war was over. Salzburg was heavily bombed before my train arrived. We were transferred to trucks, 20 riddled cars, and driven to the next railroad station. On a bitterly cold night, we arrived in Rosenheim, where we must wait for the connection to Munich to be restored. The station had been destroyed in the bombing. Thousands of people scattered in panic when they heard the bombs whistling in the air. Deprived of the opportunity to escape because of our wounds, we threw ourselves on the ground between the rails and lay there until the leaden rains stopped. Then we huddled together and froze for hours, waiting for the train. The station at Munich was burning when we got there. The British bombed here too. Red Cross nurses helped me when I could no longer move on my own. My comrades stayed in Munich, in the hospital. In 7 hours, my train reached Augsburg. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken only an hour. Throughout the night, the bombing did not stop. In Augsburg, I was taken under the care of a Red Cross sister. I could not walk, dead tired. All I wanted to do was close my eyes and sleep. 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 December 22nd, 1944. They tried to lift me out of bed at noon. The Americans were bombing the city and they wanted to escort me to the bomb shelter. I chased them away, yelling at them to leave me alone. I want to sleep. In the evening, I went with the military echelon, which should arrive in Hanover in the morning. December 23rd, 1944. The strain of these wanderings is too much for me. Every muscle aches. It is wonderful that everywhere I meet kind people willing to help. My crutches make me feel as helpless as a small child. The railroad workers put me on a freight train going to Bremen. The driver's cab is very nice and warm. The driver and the stoker arranged a seat for me on a pile of burlap. They were surprised to see my insignia and awards. They couldn't believe that wounded combat officers could travel under such harsh conditions. We talked about the war, about the destroyed cities and factories. A machinist lost his entire family in a bombing raid in Bremen. The stoker lost his son-in-law who died in Russia. Both agreed with me that it was necessary to make peace in the West in order to direct all resources to the East. Both are ready to go to war with the Russians again as they did during World War I when they were young. A small commuter passenger train eventually took me to Java. It was midnight. The air group commander sent his car to pick me up to take me home. Standing in the dark at the garden gate, I watched as Lilo came out of the house and rushed toward me. I wanted to squeeze her in a hug like I had done before, but this time I couldn't. I need both hands to hold my crutches. I kissed Lilo, and we walked towards the house together. When she spoke, her voice shook. "You're walking so slowly," she said. "I didn't realize it was this bad. The living room is warm and cozy. I am very, very tired. Tired of the strain and effort of moving, tired of what I've seen and heard and experienced, tired of the war. But right now, on top of everything else, I am happy. Happy to be home at last, happy that Lilo and I are together again. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve, and little Ingrid will be running around the room with her golden hair all dishevelled. She'll bombard me with endless questions. Are you back for good? Why have you been gone so long? Why do you walk so slowly? Why did the war happen? Why? I couldn't leave the house until mid-January. Snow and ice prevented me from going to the hospital. I learned that Captain Voitka had taken command of the squadron again after being discharged from the hospital, but had been killed in action a few days before. I was sent my logbooks, official confirmation of my victories, and informed that I had been awarded the Knight's Cross. The logbooks contain records of nearly 2,000 flights, including over 400 combat sorties. I shot down 52 enemy airplanes. In total, I've flown over 1 million kilometres. Will I ever fly again? On January 1st, 1945, our air group undertook its last large-scale operation. British and American airfields in France and Belgium were successfully bombed. For many of my comrades, it became the last flight. About 500 German pilots were killed. Major Specht also did not return. I think back to last New Year's Eve. The great mission that the little commander had been waiting for, he fulfilled exactly 1 year later. Having accomplished its last greatest effort, German military aviation essentially ceased to exist. Only a few air groups remained. The advancing enemy in the east and west crossed the borders of the Reich at this time. Millions of Germans in the east fled before the approaching hordes of Asians. Words cannot describe the horror and suffering they endured. My mother and sister came to visit me at the end of January. The round-the-clock bombing of our cities by the British and Americans continued uninterruptedly. Hundreds of thousands of people died during these bombardments. Heavy fighting continues on all fronts. German soldiers are fighting desperately, defending every scrap of native land. According to the latest figures, the losses on the German side are estimated at 4,000 men. Day after day, even in a remote corner like ours in Frisia, the peace of the countryside is shattered by the wail of sirens announcing another raid. Again and again, Lilo has to carry the children and some belongings to the shelter. A trench is dug for me behind the house. Even a concrete shelter couldn't have been more comfortable for me. I like to see what's going on. I'm used to it. In March, I asked the air group commander for permission to assist the ground staff. Despite my crutches, I managed to get a lot done in a day, selecting fields as landing sites for military airplanes, being on duty at control posts, setting up a mobile system of tracking stations. We are entering the Wilhelmshaven defence system. The city has been turned into a fortress and will be defended to the last man. The garrison will be supported from the air in the event of a blockade. I have joined the garrison command as the officer in charge of air operations. The garrison consists of about 40,000 sailor infantrymen trained for land combat. They are all inexperienced, with only a small fraction having enough weapons. A week has passed, and I am more and more convinced of the futility of our resistance in the West. The preservation of all our forces is necessary to stop the advance of the Russians into Europe. I know that in the event of an armistice in the West, millions of exhausted, depressed, battle-weary German soldiers will revive their spirits, unite and, gathering their last strength, give it in the fight against communism to defend their homes and to save Europe from irreparable disaster. I myself, without the slightest hesitation, will sit in the cockpit of a fighter plane to fly and fight again until the last invader is driven out of my fatherland. This is not just my opinion. It is the opinion of every officer and soldier I have spoken to in recent weeks. We all long for the day to come when the Western Allies realize that it is not Germany that poses a threat to their lives and freedom, but Soviet Russia. On Memorial Day for our heroes, March 11, 1945, I made the following entry in my diary. This war has shown the standard by which the spirit of Germany is to be measured, the measure of all things. We have realized in peacetime the distinction between good and evil. Today courage must be distinguished from cowardice. War gives the brave an exaltation. God has endowed them with courage and strength. Even though they may perish, their heroic deaths must never be forgotten. In this hour, the hardest hour for our dear fatherland, the German people remember them. I need only close my eyes to remember my fallen comrades who fought beside me in the most brutal battles. In the last 2 years, I have become very lonely. Few of my comrades have returned from this war we called the Great Fighter Graveyard. We were often defeated due to the numerical superiority of the enemy, and often in fair combat. But even after defeat, we remained victorious, victorious over ourselves, victorious over our deeper instincts that threatened to rob us of our courage and faith. Again and again, without a moment's hesitation, we took to the air. Each time someone didn't return, but there was never any excuses or dissatisfaction. Those of us who survived were wounded many times. I myself was wounded 5 times and was left crippled. If the question ever arises of driving the Russians back into their forests, swamps and steppes before making peace with the West, I will be very willing to fight again. I will have new comrades. Together we will bring back the spirit of the past and become part of this tradition. When we meet, we will shake hands with a smile, and then we will remember with sadness our fallen comrades. Their thirst for the feat will forever remain with us, fighter pilots. Having fulfilled our task, having liberated our homeland, we will be able to pay a worthy tribute to the memory of our heroes and our comrades with the victorious roar of our planes. Their deaths were not in vain. The war is lost. The war is lost. The war is lost. These words hit the nerves like a sledgehammer. The full meaning of it is beyond my comprehension. Hitler is dead. The Reich is defeated and at the mercy of the occupiers. The once mighty German army has ceased to exist. The survivors are in prisoner of war camps or roaming the countryside in unruly gangs or begging alone. The German soldier is dishonoured. Even the memory of the dead is blotted out. Our world is ruined. It is useless now to ask academic questions such as responsibility and guilt. The war is lost. It is enough to dwell on the fact that victory went to the strongest. We are shocked by the sensational revelations that have rapidly followed each other. Our road to the future now passes through poverty and want. A monstrous despotism was developed among the Nazis in Hitler's entourage. Disgusted with revulsion, fighting German soldiers and officers turned their backs on those whose terrible war crimes and atrocities were now revealed. The criminals, who generally worked in concentration camps and laboratories on the home front, dishonoured the honour of Germany. Crimes committed under the sign of the swastika deserve severe punishment. The Allies could have left these criminals to the fighting German soldiers to do justice. The war is lost. The armistice has been concluded. Does that mean peace has come? Mean peace?